Greetings, everyone. It is Coach Twilight, and today's topic is going from codependent to co-creator. Um, Emotional wellness is an important thing. We all want to achieve it. We all want to feel the ease, the lack of stress, the joy, the abundance. We all want those things. The important thing to note about achieving emotional wellness is it is something that emanates from the inside. It is not necessarily something that we can create on the outside. You can't have enough money, you can't have enough relationships, you can't have enough clothes, although that will help. That will definitely help. But you can't have enough of outside things to truly bring you inner peace. So today we're going to talk about the topic of codependency and switching and shifting that to being a co-creator. Now, the first thing I want to say is, first, in my message, I can only share with you what I have arrived to in my journey. Much of these things may come across very convincing. I may speak with a lot of passion. However, this is me sharing what I've learned on my journey and connecting the dots through either psychological, spiritual, or metaphysical information. Number two, you may identify with some of these prototypes that I'm expressing. Don't allow yourself to feel down on yourself for those reasons. Don't beat yourself up, because we are all in a phase of learning and growing. And as long as you are aware of the challenges that you face, the behaviors that you've engaged in, and you're willing to be accountable and move forward, you can do so. So you've taken the first step, and that's something to be proud of. Number three, I am on my journey still. As I uncover and I unravel layers within myself, I am sharing and I am providing information for others so that they may be able to feel more uplifted and inspired on their personal journey. So I just wanted to get out those three disclaimers. Hopefully, that will bring you some comfort as we dive deep into these different ideologies. What is codependency? Codependency is kind of like a vampirist relationship. It's one in which, the person totally depends on the other person with them to either fill a void or need that they have not yet fulfilled within themselves.
Don't you come any closer.
Put it down.
Who was your muse on that, huh? Who was your muse, Lucius? Oh, do you remember this one? Because I do. Yeah, I sent tapes from the inside back and forth with you while you worked on them out here. Oh, and this...
For example, you could be completely codependent on your partner for your sense of self-worth. You could be completely codependent on your partner for your sense of happiness. It doesn't necessarily have to be anything financial that you're codependent on. It could definitely be that you're just codependent on this person through their actions, behaviors, words, and speech for them to give you some sense of validation. Now, what you may need that validation for, it varies amongst individuals. However, a codependent relationship is when you are generally trying to get a void filled. Now, how does codependency happen, you might ask? Well, codependency actually comes from just having us, most of the time, most of our issues that we have, most of the problems that we have are carried on from childhood to adulthood. So as adults, we are really pretty much living out the unresolved issues in our childhood most of the time. And most of the time, like if you're a child and you go through a traumatic situation that was unresolved, you maybe were in a dysfunctional family where you didn't get a lot of love and support. Your needs may have been trivialized or ignored. You may have experienced abuse on some level, whether it be mental, emotional, or physical. You may have, a distorted sense of self-worth, so on and so forth. But these are all things that move us into our adulthood and the paradigm from which we see life as. So we see life on an outlook based on a conditioning of the mind, limited thought processes and limited belief systems about ourselves based on what we were conditioned to believe when we were children. And then as we become adults, we repeat certain patterns of behavior. So codependency is heavily rooted in dysfunctional homes, dysfunctional upbringings, and unresolved issues that we experienced as children.
It's cold. It's got no taste.
I want all that to come over this! Oh, shut up! The dog is better than this!
Now, it's important that we identify that a lot of the codependent behavior, a lot of the unresolved issues is something that emanated from childhood. The thing is, the problem is when you're an adult though, it is a total different expectation thrust upon you. You may have kids of your own. You may have other people who rely on and depend on you. Now remember, codependency is an unhealthy version of depending on a person. So, for example, as a child, we don't really have a choice. You know, our authority figures, our parents, society is in control. So imagine a car and you're driving along and the parent or your authority figure or your guardian is the one that is at the wheel. And they go and they crash into another car, or they go and they scrape the side of the vehicle or fall off of a mountaintop. All these destructive things, and you're in the passenger seat and you just simply have to deal with it because you're a child. Now, when you become an adult, you are now the person in the driver's seat. You see? But a lot of times as an adult, because we're so conditioned under such negative and dysfunctional premises, that we're driving the car, we're the ones in control, and we go crash into another car, and we go scrape the side of our vehicle, and we go fall off of a bridge, and then we blame it on our parents or authority figures or situations that have occurred during our childhood. While those situations are significant to note, the difference is the person in the driver's seat is now you. So every situation that occurs in your life, you bear the brunt of it, you take the responsibility for it, and ultimately you suffer the consequences of it regardless of how your upbringing has affected you. So it's important that we note these different occurrences, these different behaviors, and really work towards acknowledging them, and then building a bridge to being more functional and having a greater propensity for wellness. All right, so hopefully if this isn't too harsh for you guys, I know I'm diving kind of deep, and some of it may feel like it stings, but let's just keep going through it. Let's keep muddling through it, and I promise you it'll get better. So what are some types of codependent behavior types that could have been accumulated during our childhood? Well, number one, caretaker. The person who stepped in and compensated for mom and dad because mom and dad or great grandma and great grandpa weren't there, or they weren't truly a fully participant in the parenting aspect. So you jumped in, you took care of the kids, you did things for your brothers and your sisters, and you kind of became a leader. And while that's good for that actually really wasn't good, but it was probably what was needed at that time. You'll find as you become an adult that it could be very, very draining to your psyche to constantly engage in taking care of others and not properly know how to take care of yourself. You could be a person who's afraid of being hurt. You could be a person who's a people pleaser. The only way that you are worthy and the only way that people like you is if you are pleasing them. You may have a hard time with setting boundaries. You may feel unworthy, like everything you do is wrong. You could have had a very overly critical parent or very overly critical authority figure. You could, constantly feel this way because these things are constantly reinforced in your life. So when something is constantly reinforced, it's like an affirmation. An affirmation is a word that you say that is constantly reinforced by its repetitiveness to the point where it becomes a part of your mental makeup, right? Well, if someone is affirming to you that, hey, you're stupid, you're dumb, you never do things right, you're such a screw up, so on and so forth, that becomes repetitive affirmations in your mind. And as a child, our subconscious mind is so open and so free that we generally tend to take in anything that is said to us and we take it in as truth. So once it becomes a part of your mental conditioning, now this affirmation is constantly in your head. You begin to almost live out what they call self-fulfilling prophecy. You begin to live out that destiny and you begin to constantly reaffirm that in your life, which makes you believe that it is true. So these are some of the behavior types of a person who is prone to be codependent. Now let's talk about codependency and relationships. So let's take the caretaker, for example. I will use myself as an example because, as I said in the beginning, I'm on my journey. So when I was a child, I was made to feel like I was responsible for upholding and uplifting a certain persona in order to be inspirational to my younger siblings and the younger children around me. I may have learned that through watching people, and I may have learned that through just small little words and rewards and benefits. So for example, I would be rewarded if I did something responsible.
I wanted this to be a good night for my parents, and I didn't want my father to think I couldn't handle things. So I decided to keep everything that happened.
Oh, it's Mario! So then when she came back, she started braiding Tanya's hair. You got to watch the game. You guys came back. She's trying to make it look like everything was all peachy and fine. It's not!
I told you we should have let Chris babysit. Girl, give me my money back.
I'ma kick her ass.
I would be
On my way.
berated if I did something irresponsible, even as a child. So I held on to the idea that I was responsible for others. As time went on, people began to depend on me for emotional support. If not that, sometimes people would unload on me simply because, I was seen as to be the stronger one. So as the stronger one, I was supposed to be able to take on all the burdens of other people and do it gracefully, But there was some other, dysfunctions that came out of that. I'm not saying I was perfect. I was seen as bossy, as abrupt, as domineering. So all of those different labels were labels that I accumulated during my childhood. I began to attract relationships where I was the caretaker and they were the person that needed to be taken care of. You see? And so what ends up happening in a situation like that is you end up creating an unhealthy relationship because you are coming from a point or a premise of dysfunction and they are responding to that premise of dysfunction, which leads me to my next point. They say opposites attract, right? But really, that's kind of a flawed premise. What we're talking about here is the law of polarity. In the law of polarity, everything has an equal opposite. So in the law of polarity, which is a metaphysical universal law, everything that is has an opposite is on the same frequency. So if you're happy and sad, it's on the same frequency. It's just on different sides of the spectrum. if you're female and you're male, it's on the same spectrum, just different sides of the frequency. You see what I'm saying? Bad and good on the same frequency, different sides of the spectrum. So ultimately, what we're doing is when we're so-called attracting opposites, we're actually just vibrating on the same frequency as our polar opposite. So when I was in codependent relationships, such as me being the caretaker and the person needing to be taken care of, that was not the premise and the full extent of my personality, taking care of people. It is just a persona that I took on and am quite familiar with. So in a relationship, I sometimes wanted to be the one who would have someone be there for me emotionally or spiritually or financially. But there was no way that they could do that because they were in the premise of being the one that needed to be taken care of. And I repeated this pattern over and over and over and over again until I started to do some really true self-examination.